Welcome to our program in a nutshell. I'm Bob Savakinus. Today we have our special guest, Julie Esty. Julie's been involved in many historical and theatrical productions in our area for many years. Her most famous program event that she does is the annual Dunmore Cemetery program. This will be her 23rd year that she's involved in doing tours at the cemetery and just being involved in the program overall. She's written several local history books, and she's working on a fifth one now, so she's done 4, so this will be her 5th. They are called Stories in Stone, Volumes 1 and 2, Murder in Scranton, and Baked with Love. She's done educational talks in schools all over the valley about the Civil War life, civilian life, and for over 20 years, half of the widows of a funeral memorabilia exhibit that she has put on. The history started in 1966 or 67 when she was a little girl and got involved in just wanting to know about Gettysburg and all the Civil War activities. She studies a lot of local history and has been involved in many programs locally. So we're going to turn it right over to Julie and tell us about this major event that you do to start off our Halloween season here in early October of the Dunmore Cemetery.
Well, that's what it is. It's the Dunmore Cemetery Tour. This is my 23rd year. And it's usually a walking tour that people go on. It's a 2.5-hour tour. We usually get upwards of 1,600 folks over 2 Sundays. And this year, due to the circumstances that we have going on in the world, we had to adapt. So this year we have the first annual Dunmore Cemetery Auto Tour, which is going to take place on October 4th.
Tell us the details, like what time, what will people expect? Is there a charge? Tell us about the program itself at the cemetery.
There is no charge. Admission is free. It's always been free. We do ask this year that folks bring a non-perishable item for the food pantries. We are collecting for Feed a Friend because it's been a brutal year all around. And that is our admission fee. Of course, if people don't have that, that's fine. Everyone is welcome. The tour will start at 2 o'clock. We always say they run from 2 to 4, but this year is a very different year. And we're expecting, from what we're seeing, cars to be lining up, and we will keep them going through the cemetery as long as we have light. Folks will line up. They will come through the cemetery gate. They will leave their Feed a Friend things in the barrels that are there, and then they will proceed through the cemetery where they'll be given, each car will receive one booklet, which has a map and beautifully drawn sketches of the graves that are on the tours and fast facts about the people that are highlighted on this year's drive-through tour. So you'll be able to drive through at your own, decent speed, check everybody out. Interspersed will be the dearly departed players because we didn't want to go a year and not see everyone. The cemetery will be decorated very nicely. Some wonderful folks have kicked in, some wonderful businesses have kicked in to help us. And it's a tour that you will be able, if you save the booklet, you'll be able to do it by yourself, either walking or driving through at another time, because those folks out there aren't going anywhere. They're going to stay where they are, so you'll be able to do the tour whenever, the recipients of the booklet will be able to do the tour whenever they like. It's called Who's Who in the Dunmore Cemetery Volume 1, because we're thinking that we might like to do this again.
Well, I know it's been going on for many years, and I know you've had many crowds. There are large crowds coming out to enjoy the vignettes, the performances by the past players, and of course this year being different. So it sounds like you've come up with a wonderful idea for the drive-through and everything. And from what I know, the Dunmore Cemetery has some very famous people interned in it. Can you tell us about some of who the people are there that the audience will have a chance to tour?
That'd be giving it away, but I can tell you about some folks.
Tease us with 1 or 2, maybe.
Some folks who aren't on the tour that are really amazing that we might hit on at some point. We have Marie Wainwright, who is a wonderful actress from way back. In fact, she played with Edwin Booth, whose brother is known for not doing such wonderful things. Right. Marie Wainwright is out there. Her daughter is buried next to her, and her daughter Gertrude is very interesting because she was also in theater. But Gertrude directed blind theatrical students, and she enjoyed that because they had no fear of an audience. Of course, they walk out on stage, they don't see how many hundreds of people are there, they have nothing to be afraid of. So that's what Gertrude did. We have a Medal of Honor, a Congressional Medal of Honor recipient out there on the Hill, Irvin Payne from the Civil War. And we have a Merrill's Marauder, Robert Nicholson, who did amazing things in World War II. This year, folks are going to get some usual suspects.
Okay.
You know, but one thing I will say, we are, it's nice because it's 100 years since the woman died. Martha Matthews Owens made it to the tour. She was a history teacher with the Dunmore School District, and she died 100 years ago. And she took Dunmore school students to #1 in the country in musical education with her curriculum. And, you know, just a lovely, lovely woman in Dunmore's past. And the Dunmore Federation of Teachers are going to be decorating Martha Matthews Owens' grave this year for the tour. So that's a really nice thing.
Tell us, for the audience, what is involved in preparing for the event, what the players do, who some of them are, if you're able to share that with us as our ideas.
The dearly departed players are a group of very interesting folks that I assembled along the way over all of these years. Many of us have been together for 15 years. We work very well together. We have the usual suspects, Carl Barbie, who has performed professionally all over the world, Wendy Belaski, Laura Doyle, Elle is wonderful. In fact, Elle, I believe, is the one who came up with the idea of the booklet and the drive-through. We have Dana Jackson, who is affiliated with the Dunmore High School Theater. And Dana's the one who worked out the whole idea for the booklet that folks are going to get. We have S. Robert Powell from the Carbondale Historical Society. You know, Robert is a wonderful, wonderful historian in our valley, just a treasure. You know, each and every one of them, each and every player. Nelson Wood. Nelson has been with us forever, and Nelson is like our tech guy. And this year, Nelson is doing a crazy weatherman that we sort of touched on a few years back. And, you know, this year we've got Nelson out and about doing the crazy weather thing, but he's going to be droning. You know, so that kind of fits in. So, you know, people should look out their car windows and probably wave at Nelson because they'll end up on, you know, on footage. You know, it's just nice. One thing about this tour is it's nice that it's going to give us a chance to have a little fun and play with things where we're usually very severe. This year we're just gonna try and have fun. In fact, Roger Mattis is one of our cast members. Roger and I are at the beginning of the tour, and we're taking the 1960s. So when folks come in, they're gonna come past this hippie tent with the music going. You know, we got the go ahead to put some tunes on and turn it up. So, you know, we're hoping that folks come through and they have a good time.
If anyone in our audience isn't familiar with the location of the Dunmore Cemetery, can you kind of tell us a little bit about how you would find it, where it's located and everything? It's
located on Warren and Church Street. What the police are telling me folks will need to look for tour day is Quincy Avenue. They're going to want to come in on that little short stretch of Quincy there before the Dunmore Elementary School. And they will come up Warren Street, past the high school, and past the Jewish cemeteries that are there, and then they will make a left into the cemetery. Okay. And the police should be there, because if they try to come in from the route higher up, I believe that's going to be blocked off. This has the potential to create quite the traffic issue.
But again, that's one of the reasons why I was kind of hoping that we could get a little better detailed explanation for the audience, and they would know exactly what the best method to approach it is.
Yeah, via Quincy.
Okay. Enough talk about the cemetery tour. Let's talk a little bit about Julie Esty, the person. You've written several books. Tell us a little bit about your inspiration in writing these books, and tell us about the books themselves.
Well, I started the first one was Stories in Stone, Tales of Life from the Dunmore Cemetery. I had spent so much time out there, you know, it was something that needed to be done. I did it, and I addressed 10 or 12 folks who were buried in the cemetery at that time. Then I went on and I did a volume 2, which was half Dunmore and half Forest Hills, because I get an awful lot of questions about the cemeteries that surround Dunmore. So I addressed a few folks that were over in the cemetery next door. And I did Murder in Scranton, which I absolutely love that, because when you look back at old murders, having hindsight, you know, you being able to look back, you know, it's 2020. And we had some very interesting crimes happen here. I mean, and you know, I'm sure you've seen mugshots. You know, the quality of criminal was just that they all have their suits on for their mugshots, and it's just an interesting avenue in Scranton's past. And I think it's very possible that we had a serial killer in this area between 1902 and even maybe as early as 1900 to 1905. So, you know, you look at these things going on and crime and punishment back then. And then I moved on to a totally different thing, which was the Baked with Love. And that was, you know, I was looking for new recipes to add to my own lineup for the holidays. And I started looking at the Scranton Republican Cooking Contest. And all these ladies submitted their recipes, and I'm sure that they were all very proud of their recipes. But I seriously question whether or not anybody ever really tested them.
What time frame was this?
Not the 1930s.
1930s.
Late 1920s into the 1930s. Because I tested hundreds of recipes. My kitchen for months looked like it was just blown up by the Pillsbury Doughboy. I mean, there was flour everywhere, you know, just things of sugar. I'm testing everything. I ended up having to go to Weight Watchers because from testing all this stuff, I gained so much weight. And the squirrels on my front lawn were enormous because anything that didn't work just got dumped right out onto the front lawn. So we have this great cookbook now with 10 or 12 recipes from women from the past. And they do actually work out, and they can be staples in someone's lineup. And then I included recipes from me and some of the dearly departed players, and Nancy, the lovely Nancy McDonald, who wrote If You Can Play Scranton, she submitted one. And it's just, again, another interesting avenue in Scranton's history. There's just so many of them to go down. You know, it's like a giant egg hunt.
So where can someone obtain your books?
The Lackawanna Historical Society,
Okay.
the Dunmore Historical Society, they can get a hold of me. The Library Express has them. You know, they're around.
Okay. Well, want to have an opportunity for the guests of our audience to purchase some of your books then if they're interested in that. Tell us a little bit about what got you motivated that you wanted to be involved with the Dunmore Cemetery in our local history and maybe a little bit of the macabre, if you want to call it that.
History was always a big thing for me. My father supplied me with a lot of books, and that's where it came along. I ended up in the Dunmore Cemetery because I went to school at Central, but I used to go to Dunmore's football games. I had friends over there, and I would go to Dunmore's football games. And that was how you got into the football game if you didn't want to pay the admission. You sneaked in through the cemeteries. And of course, way back in the day, all those years ago, which was a very long time ago, cigarettes were only 75 cents a pack. So if I sneaked into the cemetery, through the cemetery to the football game, then I had money to buy cigarettes, which is an all-around bad thing now, we know, on so many levels, and I'm sorry. I'm trying to make it up to everybody, and that's why I'm in the cemetery now trying. It's my penance for doing what I did. Nobody should be sneaking through the cemetery. But that's how I ended up in the cemetery. That was my first introduction to Dunmore. Then I ended up photographing, you know, and I worked semi-professionally, and I learned how to use my darkroom by photographing the cemetery and going there. And really, it's unfortunate that I didn't save the negatives because it would have been a huge photographic record of this place. Then I started to period dress, and that's when I ran into Mary Ann Moran in the Lackawanna Historical Society. And when I hooked up with the tours, there were tours going on out there by LHS, and I was actually the first stop on the tour, the first costume stop. And then they changed formats, and I took it over. And that's how this tour evolves into this history thing and how I get into this whole local history deal by starting out there in the cemetery and looking at all the wonderful folks that are there. And of course, along the way, you know, I had, when I was in 8th grade, I had T.C. Connolly, who wrote the book on the Gravity Railroad, as a history teacher. You know, it doesn't get any better than having T.C., you know, God rest her, as your history teacher. So there were all these wonderful influences and this chain of events that happened to get me into the cemetery. So it's really been, well, I'm 59 years old. I graduated in 1978. How many years am I out there now in one form or another? 40? almost 40 years.
Almost 40.
I've spent more time in the cemetery than I've spent anywhere else.
So October, I assume, is your favorite season, the Halloween
yeah.
season. Tell us a little bit about why. What makes you love Halloween and what makes you love the fall season so
it's
much?
just great. The colors, the leaves, the coolness. Like I can think, not only that, Halloween, it's the best holiday. If I were president, I would make it a national holiday. The costumes. Well, see, the thing is, costumes were a big thing with me when I was a kid for Halloween. And some people say, oh, you don't want to go getting dressed up and it's not that big of a deal or whatever. You don't know what a costume is going to do for a kid. Look at what it did to change my life. From those Halloween costumes, it went to a Civil War dress, and I'm sure you know. Like our wonderful Jennifer Ackman. Jen is wearing, we've moved into these things where our costuming does so much good. My daughter grew up in the cemetery, and now she works in New York City in costuming when there is work in New York City. So it's just October is our month to shine, whether we're in the cemetery in historic costuming or we're at the Rocky Horror Picture Show dressed up as magenta, because I still do that, and it's wonderful.
It sounds like, you have a wonderful personality in that you have a combination of love of our local history in addition to the theatrical performances and everything that's a part of it. I know at some point I've seen a little bit of a collection that you have a little bit on the macabre, if we're going to call it that. And we're in October. Is that something you want to discuss a little bit about? Tell us what that display is that at times you bring out for certain events.
Again, with one of the dearly departed players, Wendy Belaski, we exhibit funeral memorabilia. And we've got quite the collection of funeral memorabilia.
Tell our audience a little bit about some of the things that are in this collection. And
we did travel with an embalming table, but we had to get rid of it because the smell in the back of the car, even after 100 years, was. But we do have embalming tools, funeral, the older funeral homes that are no longer in existence. We have a lot of advertising things from them. We have mourning clothes. One thing that I really love, one of my favorite pieces, is the 1938 final exam in restorative arts from an embalming school in New York City. And what it is it's a series of 4 photographs of a young man who jumped in front of a train. And trains can do a lot of damage to the human body, and what we have is the photograph of him when he was brought into the embalming school, and as he's ready to be the restorative arts final, and what you see a series of photographs of what these guys did to get him to a state where he could be viewed at a funeral home, and because they restored him, he was able to be identified, which is wonderful. The students were taught by a man who was a sculptor. So it's kind of interesting that this artist ends up teaching students how to restore corpses, cadavers. So we do have a lot of interesting stuff, and we usually exhibit a lot in the month of October. But this year, because of the COVID, we haven't. We've even exhibited for the Maryland Park Service at the Surratt House and Museum, which was an absolute honor.
So where do you come across pieces like this, such unique pieces? Do you have any fun stories of how you've acquired
everywhere.
Some of these
They
pieces?
come from everywhere. We find them. We purchased a lot out of a defunct funeral home. People give them to us. We find them at yard sales and flea markets. And there are times that I'll wake up in the morning and open the front door, and it's like the little fairy has been there, and there are these anonymous items on the front porch, and I suspect where they come from, but I can't be totally certain. But people do leave little gems from. It's like Santa Claus.
On a different level for Halloween, though.
Yes, on a different level. But it's amazing because they have these pieces. Well, I remember as a child, my mother had a postmortem of her grandmother, a postmortem photograph, which was done to send to relatives across the country so that they could see how mom was taken care of. And my mother did not want that photograph around. And she destroyed it. I'd give my eye teeth to have that photograph now. postmortem photography was a big thing. And there are people who don't understand our funeral customs are changing. And they're changing as we're sitting here. Not as many people are being buried. You've got cremation. You know, it's just a whole different thing. We don't go to funerals from viewings from 2 to 4, 7 to 9 for 2 days like we used to back in the day. You know, it's all changing, and especially when you see school students, to explain these things to them, and not just school students, older folks, people that are my age, when you bring these back, the wonderful memories they come out with about the funeral homes that were here, and the funeral directors. They are a very interesting, often forgotten group in local history.
You mentioned some of the clothing in your display, that mourning pieces. What exactly does that mean, mourning pieces, as far as clothing goes?
Dark.
Give us a little description of what it was like that people would wear to the viewing.
You know, your whole, we have some late 1800s Victorian women's mourning clothes, which is the very severe black, you know, the widow's weeds. Of course, that all evolved, and the veils changed, and our dresses changed. You know, you're now not wearing the long black. It's okay to go to a funeral home in black. Now it's pretty much anything when you go to a funeral home. I mean, I've seen people show up in flip-flops. One piece that we do have that I am very, very honored to have is a late 1800s, early 1900s burial pieces for a Jewish burial, which that's, again, a whole other avenue, because they have different customs going on. You know, so it's nice to be able to show people how the Jewish folks are doing things, or were doing things 100 years ago. You know, just interesting pieces with interesting backgrounds, and it's so nice to be able to share it. And it's really been sad this year not being able to get out and do those things and see everybody and share those, you know, interesting pieces. They've been locked away for a year.
Just because, again, you know, what we're learning about your background and your knowledge and your love of the Halloween season and fall and everything, I mean, what are some fun stories or something that you'd care to share with us that were memorable Halloween events for you, or just memorable experiences that you've had in the fall season that makes it so special to you?
I think the best Halloween memory, and the thing that really kicked off my love of Halloween, was I started out in Dunmore, over on Large Street, across the street from the electric plant, which that was like a whole other country versus Southside. So I'm like 5, 6 years old. And Halloween comes along, and of course you're a little kid and you're so excited. And my sister and I were in the kitchen with my mother, and there was a knock on the door, so we went flying down the hall, my sister and I, down the hallway of the house on Large Street, expecting to see trick-or-treaters. And what we saw what looked to me to be like this giant bug thing with these big eyes, which scared the daylights out of us, and we went flying down the hall, absolutely terrified. And here what it was my father went and got the gas mask he was issued when he went into Korea. Okay? So he's got this gas mask, and it looks like a giant ant. When you're 5 years old, you don't know, okay? And I said to my father, you know, that was my best Halloween memory, and I really believe that that's what kicked off the whole costume thing and love of Halloween and this excitement and everything. And many, many years later, when I moved into my own house, when I got married and I had a daughter, I said to my father, you know, that how important that gas mask was to me, and that I wish that I had it. And one day I came home from work, and I opened the back door to let the dog out, and I saw this thing laying in the corner of the porch that had cobwebs on it and leaves, and it was just like, what is it? Is it a dead animal? Is it a dead bat? What is it? Well, here my father had saved that gas mask, and he had it in the beams of the garage. And he must have been doing something, and he found it and dug it out, and he left it on my back porch. And I have that gas mask today, and that was the kickstart of great Halloweens. You know, really, like, who would have thought? Who would have thought? But I still have the gas mask, and there you have it, the big Halloween memory.
It's a wonderful story, a wonderful story. Local history, I know that's very important to you and everything. How do you encourage young adults to concern themselves with our local history?
It needs to be taught in schools. They just need to go out, they need to look, they need to go to cemeteries. We've had students, when we're in the cemetery, we've had people who have brought their children to us and said they're afraid to come in here, they think you have to be invited. People need to take their children. They need to take their children to cemeteries. They need to engage them in events at the Lackawanna Historical Society, in Carbondale. They need to read. They need to take them to the libraries. Our history is so important. We were such a hub here. You know, it's not little Scranton. It's big Scranton. It's big Lackawanna Valley. It's big Carbondale. So many wonderful things happened here, and we were the start of so many things in this country. You know, like, don't lock out that local history. I wish they taught it in school. I wish that they could design a program where folks like us could go in and see students on a regular basis, because it's just wonderful. And every person that was here, every person in the Dunmore Cemetery, Cathedral Cemetery, back in Manuka, it doesn't matter what cemetery, they're all amazing threads in the wonderful tapestry of this valley.
So basically, it sounds like cemeteries are a great resource, a great place to learn about our history, a great place that needs to be kept up good, and also a place that we can interpret and learn about our local history, but also have a little bit fun with it. Yeah. And it sounds like your annual event is going to be a lot of fun.
We're going to have fun this year.
Tell us again a little bit about it, if anybody joined in a little bit late again. Tell us again the date, the time, and everything about it.
It is going to take place on October 4th this year. This year we are only doing one Sunday.
And this is the Dunmore Cemetery drive-through event.
It's the Dunmore Cemetery. It's the first drive-through we've ever done. Okay. Admission is free. It will run from 2 to 4. We imagine that folks are going to start lining their car up, and we are going to send them through at a very decent pace. One thing I do want to make very, very clear, the instructions to go through the tour and do the tour will only be distributed per car. Okay. I will not distribute anything to anyone on foot. And that is not only for their protection, but it is for the protection of our cast. Right. So you have to drive through, you're going to do a tour, you're going to see the players. You know what? We want everybody to come and have a good time. Like I said, it's from 2 to 4. We know that people are going to start showing up early, and we will keep people going through as long as we possibly can. We just want them to have fun. Join us, have fun. You know, look for me and Roger at the beginning in the hippie tent. If you have a peace sign, wear it. Show me your peace sign. We're going to have fun. Make sure you come on the tour.
It sounds like another fun event. Congratulations on reinventing it in this unique time that we're living in with the COVID situation, on turning it into a drive-through. So we wish you well with everything on it. And we want to thank you, Julie Esty, for all that you have done for preserving our history in our area, making it entertaining, and making cemeteries a part of our local history and how important it is. I'm Bob Savakinus, and this is our program, Welcome in a Nutshell. Thank you.